How's everyone? Today we're going to do a little video Q&A. Thanks to everyone who's joined me so far. We're going to do more of these in the future. I've been really focused on writing up a ton of stuff for you guys. There's been so much going on. So today we're going to talk about capitalism, the economy, the future. Dennis asked a really good question. And before I get to the question, I came across a statistic that really puts things into perspective. And the statistic goes like this. The majority of people today believe that capitalism, in its current form, is doing more harm than good. Okay, it's one of those statistics that's shocking, but maybe not surprising, if you see what I mean. So Dennis's question was kind of along these lines, and it was, how did we get from the kind of golden age capitalism of the 1950s, which seemed to be very effective at lifting the fortunes of the working and the middle class, to the capitalism of today, which he described as predatory, even confiscatory. And I'll put Dennis's question below for you. So I think that's a really good question. And it kind of gets to the heart of this massive distrust and skepticism of capitalism that's going on today, right? Like reflected in this statistic. So what I want to do is give you guys kind of a sophisticated way to think about capitalism. Not, you know, the stuff you read in the newspapers, the stuff you hear on cable news, it never really feels right, does it? So I'm gonna talk about some of the work that I did as, you know, kind of the chief economist of one of the world's biggest corporations, and I want to give you guys a very sophisticated way to think about capitalism and the economy. And it's much more, it's kind of the cutting edge. It's the way the world's best economists think about it today. And that doesn't mean the guys that are constantly out there telling you that the economy is good when we all know that things are not that great out there for the average person, right? So we're not talking about that category of people. We're talking about guys you've never heard of who are extremely sophisticated and smart thinkers. So capitalism, how do we define it? Look, as time has gone on and social science has discovered and understood new things, our understanding of what capital is has grown. Okay, so in the beginning, way back in like the 1800s, we used to think of capital as just financial capital, right? Money, investments. Today, if you think about it, social scientists of all kinds will agree that there are many different kinds of capital. Okay, so imagine a pie chart, first of all, okay, just a circle. And in that circle, we're going to slice it up into different slices of pie. And those are different kinds of capital. So we have, for example, social capital, relationships. We have emotional capital, how happy we feel or not. Or, you know, as today, and we'll come to this, how distressed we feel. We can think of political capital. Do our institutions, our political institutions kind of work and deliver for us? We can think about our basic infrastructure, which is physical capital. So think about this circle and these different kinds of slices of this pie, which represent different kinds of capital. Now, while our understanding of what capital is has evolved, the sad fact is that economics as a discipline and capitalism as a practice have not kept pace very well with this, okay? And as a result, governments and politicians do not kind of act the way that they should. Their actions and policies reflect a very different paradigm, an obsolete one, where there's just one kind of capital, financial capital. And that's what we're maximizing the economy for. The problem is that when we do that in the current guise of capitalism, we are depleting many of the other kinds of capital. So it's kind of a bad trade-off, right? And one of the simplest explanations, demonstrations of this bad trade-off is when we have an economy that jacks up short-term profits, maximizes financial capital, but depletes our natural capital, right? So climate change, wildfires in California, floods in Brazil, all over the place. We're maximizing just for one kind of capital, but depleting this other kind of capital. But the same is true for all the other kinds of capital. And this was what my first kind of couple of books were about. And I tried to make the point that if we're just maximizing for short-term profits, for financial capital, we're depleting, for example, social capital, right? Now we speak of loneliness epidemics, and we see rates of friendship in kind of tremendous decline. So our social bonds are tearing themselves apart. What's another kind of capital you can see being depleted? Another one that's really easy to witness being depleted is political capital, right? I don't think any of us think, whatever side of the political fence we're on, that our political institutions are functioning very well. And so that's kind of how I want you to think about capitalism. So that brings us to the question, what is capitalism? What should it be? Well, it should be, in this new understanding, in this much more sophisticated way of thinking about it, a system that grows or maximizes all these different kinds of capital. And there may be temporary trade-offs among them. We may trade financial capital, natural capital, social capital, for emotional capital, whatever. But at the end of the day, over the long term, we should see all these kinds of capital growing, okay? And the problem with our system right now is that, as Dennis said, and it's a term that's become common, it's predatory. And it's predatory in the sense, this very precise sense, that we're maximizing one kind of capital at the expense of all the others. And that one kind of capital that's maximized for ends up in the hand of a very small social group or class, right? Who we today call them the ultra-rich or the oligarchs, doesn't matter. So in that sense, capitalism is kind of going haywire, right? And I don't say that as an enemy of capitalism. I say that as a scholar, a student, a practitioner, right? So this is why so many people feel so discontented with it. And what I want you to take away is kind of this much more sophisticated and nuanced view of what capitalism is and what it should be. So to go back to Dennis's question, what was different about the golden age of capitalism, right? And of course it's true. Not everybody was included in that golden age, for sure, right? My grandparents weren't included in that golden age. Doesn't matter. For now, we're just thinking about it in broad terms. What was different about it then is that all those kinds of capital were very much growing kind of in tandem. So it wasn't the case that financial capital was costing us social capital, natural capital, emotional capital, cultural capital, whatever, political capital, it doesn't matter. They were all kind of growing together, right? And that's what we want to see. We want to see that pie expanding as a whole. We don't just want to see this end of the pie expanding, but the other ends contracting, because in the end, we're no better off. In many respects, we may be worse off, because we end up with this weird, lopsided mess of a pie, which only certain social groups get a part of. That destabilizes our societies. And it does that, usually. This is a trade-off that, the final trade-off I'll discuss with you. Let's think about emotional capital for a second, right? How do people feel these days? Well, the statistics say that people feel really, really bad, right? They're in dire shape. Rates of distress and sadness and anger and despair are kind of shooting off the charts. So, financial capital being maximized for costing us emotional capital. And as people kind of grow pessimistic and uncertain, societies begin to come apart, right? They destabilize. Social groups lose their bonds. Distrust grows, hostility grows, enmity grows. And then we have a situation of collapse, right? Which is where we don't want to end up. So, in that sense, this is a very deep question that Dennis asks. And I think it's on a lot of our minds today, right? Why do we have the situation where more than half of people think capitalism is basically a failure? Right? They're not just making it up. It must be a failure for them. So, what I wanted to give you was a much more sophisticated and nuanced way to think about this big idea of capitalism, the cutting edge of thinking. So what I've been talking to you about is, like I said, the way that some of the world's best economists think about it. And they're not guys you might have heard of, unless you really follow the field. Guys like Thomas Piketty or A.K. Sen or Partha Dasgupta. It doesn't matter. You don't need to kind of get into the weeds and read their research papers and stuff. But I do think it's a shame that nobody is really teaching you guys that this much. So I thought I'd make this video about it to give you this kind of cutting edge view of the way we should be thinking about capitalism and the economy and the future. And if we want to preserve it, that is, right? Not as enemies of it, not in a political sense, just in an intellectual sense. So this is the paradigm shift we have to make from an economy that's just maximizing for financial capital, for the benefit of a select few, right? Very small social group, to one that's really maximizing the whole pie. All those different kinds of capital, which accrue to all of us. When we do that, that's what really lifts our living standards. And that's when societies feel confident, optimistic, happy. And as our living standards improve, things get better. That's what we want to see. Stability grows. People prosper. Upward mobility returns. So that's kind of where we want to be. But to get there, we have to make this paradigm shift from maximizing for one kind of capital at the expense of all the others to maximizing for all of them. So that's kind of 21st century capitalism, if you like. Okay? I hope that helped. I hope that wasn't too nerdy for you guys. That was pretty deep. It went pretty in-depth. Let me know. Okay, if you want more like nerdy stuff, you guys should tell me. I'm just here to kind of guide and lead the discussions and help you guys think. So you should tell me. Like I said, we'll do more video Q&As. So fire away, questions, comments, and we'll keep it going. Okay, thank you for listening. Thank you for joining, and I'll see you soon. Bye.